You're tuning in to Wellfound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. So today we're joined by Alyssa Previti, Human Resources Director at Wellfound. With 8 years of experience at Wellfound, she has deep expertise in startup hiring and talent acquisition. Today we're focusing on one of the most critical parts of the hiring process, pre-screen interviews, and how to master that crucial first conversation. Thanks so much for being with us, Alyssa.
I'm so happy to be here.
First question for you is about how you've helped with pre-screening interviews for a wide variety of companies. What is the top thing you wish candidates were prepared for?
So something that I've been wanting to talk about is how startups are looking for, like these tech companies that are hiring, particularly startups, what they're really looking for in the screening process is drive and initiative. Um, but I don't think that they're usually great at asking those questions. So I see a lot of questions that are around, uh, tell me what you think startup culture is like, or tell me about a time when you had to meet a crunch deadline and you had to work more hours, which comes across and like very fairly comes across as how close are you willing to uh, get to burnout at this company? And usually when people are interviewing, they're coming from another company for a variety of reasons, but there's already like distrust and hurt there. So it's not a great question to receive. But really, what these startup founders, if you look under the hood, what they're looking for is do you have the drive and initiative to work at this small team where we don't have things figured out yet? They are just starting out with their interview process and figuring everything out, and they don't know exactly what to ask, but that's really what they're trying to get to is tell me about a time that you took initiative, you started a project, and you saw it through A to Z, and how you're going to make my life easier at this company.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And I love refocusing that as a way of just talking about what you're driven to do rather than how you might just burn out. I think that's really great for candidates to hear. And a follow-up is about whether or not you're seeing any trends from hiring teams. You've kind of already answered that, but is there any other requirements that candidates should be sure to speak to or showcase in their interview? And maybe you've got some tips on how they might do that effectively.
Yeah, I think so. The number one thing is to communicate how you can feel safe during chaos. That I think that's the main thing of what startup founders are looking for. Because it is a very, when you're joining this team, you're one of the early hires, usually, like if you're going to a seed stage. And so you're just figuring things out, they're just figuring things out, you're kind of learning and growing together. And so just being able to communicate how you can thrive in chaos, or not even thrive, but survive it, navigate it, and build things while in that, I think is the number one thing that can really help.
So my next question is, what are startup founders and hiring managers specifically looking for in the tell me about yourself portion of interviews? That differs from what larger companies want to hear, and then maybe some advice on just how to answer that question properly in interview since it's so open.
So I think the difference between what a startup founder is looking for versus a larger company is on the same note as before is just momentum and drive. I think at a larger company, they are looking for processes, knowledge, and driven system, a little more of how to navigate the red tape and how to follow all of the rules with that. But with startups, they're looking for the momentum and drive. And so being able to showcase that I, I'm interested in XYZ. I had an idea for X, and so I built it out. I saw it, flipped it, it worked or it didn't work. Start founders don't care so much about if it didn't work, your project. They just want to hear that you built something from scratch and that it was your idea, and it wasn't something that you were kind of directed to do. That's another thing that I see a lot of when I ask the question to people, tell me about a crunch time, they usually point out a mistake someone else made or someone else told them to take initiative on something of my boss noticed that this thing was broken And so I was asked to fix it at 4 p.m. on a Friday. And so I worked until 7 p.m. And so those types of situations aren't really what people are looking for. Like it is there, you're showing like, oh, I've worked over hours before. But really what they're looking for is the drive to build out your own project and complete it. A question that I think startup founders should ask instead is, what is a successful week to you, or what is a successful project? That way, and I would encourage candidates to, when they hear these questions of, tell me about a crunch time or what working at a startup is for you, to ask that question to yourself. What is a successful week? And it may be you might not even work for a full 40-hour week that week, but I had an idea, I brought it to the team, I built it, I troubleshot it, and I shipped it. And maybe you only did that on Monday to Thursday, and then on Friday you kind of took a little rest. But I think that startup founders would rather hear that than, oh, I work 60 hours a week fixing bugs. Yeah.
That makes so much sense. We've been hearing that a lot from recruiters, so that framing the work that you've done as something you've built from 0 to 1 is maybe one of the most impactful things for startups to hear. So my next question is, how should candidates prepare differently for interviews with seed stage startups versus Series B or C startups, since there are different kinds of startups?
Yeah. So seed stage is just getting started, just getting the band together. Series BC are maybe on a tour bus, to use like a band analogy. Um, and so with the seed stage, they're going to have less roles, they're going to have less defined roles. And you kind of have to be more of like a Swiss Army knife there. Like I can do the front end, I can do the back end, I can do some design. I will do the customer support dashboard and learn what we need from there. Basically, they want to hear that you're going to come in and you're going to help with every aspect of the business, which is expected when it's such a small team. There's a lot of hats to wear, and so ambiguity is the name of the game. With B and C stage startups, they might have more processes built out. They might have more role definitions. While you're interviewing, I should have said, but while you're interviewing for those seed stages, you may have to ask more clarifying questions than you would with a BC stage. BC stage might have an HR person, they might have a recruiter, they have someone that is actually building out those role definitions and the job responsibilities. But at seed stage, they're kind of just still putting things together. And so they might not have those job descriptions completely built out. And so you might have to really ask clarifying questions so that you can get to know the role as well. And it's not because they haven't thought through it, and not in a negative way, but it's just something that they, need a little more process on.
And then for those later Series B and C startups, is there any specific advice on like what questions you should ask for those interviews?
Though I think asking the same questions help in a seed stage as well, but it's asking, what does success look like to you for the person in this role? What is this person doing in the role first week, second week, and what have they accomplished by the end of the year? Just asking more details on what a person could do to succeed that's not on the job listing, because sometimes they don't capture everything that's on the job description. So I think that's the best question that you can ask.
Oh, yeah. I think that's really good advice for almost any job interview, too. Okay, so my next question is, what's the best approach to technical interviews at early stage startups that may not have a formalized interview process or dedicated technical interviewers, which, you did a really good job of capturing that early stage startup may not be well practiced at this yet, but want to run technical interviews.
Yeah. So I think the best thing that you could do for an early stage startup that's doing a technical interview is treat it more like a paired programming session, like you're meeting with a colleague or a friend to build something together. I think founders really like to hear, let's work on this problem together, and go at it together. Um, I think you need to narrate your thinking very clearly, ask clarifying questions, and really just try to collaborate on it, because they probably haven't seen what success looks like with that question yet, and they haven't really done that process before. So working together shows that that's what your relationship will be like after they hire you too.
Awesome. I mean, I can see how helpful that would be for a founder to experience too, like that they're going to get a little test drive in what a day-to-day experience will be like. That makes so much sense. Okay, and I have a last question, which is how can candidates stand out when interviewing with startup founders who, this is kind of overlapping with the last question I asked, but who may be conducting interviews for the first time and might not have that formal HR experience like you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So the startup founder who is conducting these interviews for the first time, like an HR person or a recruiter has met with hundreds of people and spoken and gone through these questions, and they've really learned the ins and outs of an interview over time. But a startup founder, it's brand new to them, and they're interviewing for something that's deeply personal to them. And it's very they care about it more than anyone else. Um, but they don't have the processes in place or the experience to really flesh that out. So you kind of have to help with the process, I think, and coming ready with questions that you want to know about the role. And as I said before, like they're not deliberately keeping any information secret, like as if anything's missing from the job description. It's just that they haven't really written that many job descriptions before, and so the information might be missing from it. So point out anything that you're unclear about. Ask questions and get clarification, because it's not that they don't care. Like they care about this role more than anyone else in the world. So they have the answers, they just didn't know to communicate them. And then try to translate vague questions into something useful. So if they ask you something like, tell me about your biggest weakness, try to narrate that down into something that's really specific into a story, so that it's not just a broad answer.
That makes so much sense. Both of those pieces of advice are really helpful. Just to wrap things up, is there anything else you wish candidates knew that you'd love to share?
My number one thing that I want to tell candidates is that enthusiasm is the secret key to moving forward from the screen. So come with a positive attitude towards what they're working on. You don't even have to know all of the ins and outs, just really show that you're excited to solve problems and to work on it with them. And I think that'll see you through.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Alyssa.
of course.
Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.